Hi, and welcome to the 2 Minute Warning. This is our last episode, and we're happy to have you with us. This is our last night, and we promise that it will be a great experience, a great conversation, and hope that you've enjoyed it so far. And want to introduce my co-sponsor and the publisher of the Westside Gazette, Mr. Bobby Henry. How are you doing, Bobby?
As always, I'm terrific and getting better. I'm sitting here trying to figure out what I was told how to go live on this Facebook thing, so I'm still intrigued about that. But I do want to say the past few days have been most enlightening and rewarding. So I want to thank everybody for participating in this, our first series, and it's extremely new for us at the Westside Gazette. We understand the seriousness of what it means to be a media, formatted news source, meaning that there are a lot of areas that we have to become familiar with. So I am elated and grateful for the opportunity, Mr. Busby. And for those of you who are out there listening, thank you so very much. To the participants, I am most indebted to you for what you have brought. Not only for the Westside Gazette, but for all of the listeners who are out there. This is truly a unified project to make our awareness of our voting systems and our election process known and participatory by everyone. And I certainly appreciate that. From the Westside Gazette, from the NNPA, been around for 80 years, and the Black Press of America has been around for 193 years, and we're continuing, yeah, that word, to grow. So I do want to thank you, and I'm looking forward to tonight, this final episode, and to hear what this sporty young man has to say. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. This week has been just really dynamic. The conversations have gone to new heights. And while each speaker focused on a different topic, the thread of this conversation was a continuum. There were no lapses. There were no how do we connect these dots? And so I do want to thank Jennifer Cohn, Benny Smith, and Emily Levy for starting us on this journey. They provided us with great tools and great insight. And it is my hope that we can, in some ways, continue this conversation in some form. If not on a nightly basis, I hope that we have inspired you as listeners to want more. This isn't a complete topic, and by tonight you've learned everything. We know that there is still more going on. There's still more to discover about our election process, and it is so different. There are over, I think, 7,000 jurisdictions throughout the United States, and none of them are the same. They are all unique. There are some similarities, but none of them run quite the same. Yet all of them do experience similar issues, and it is incumbent upon us as voters, as citizens of this republic, to keep it striving and to keep it forever progressing. And so, with that said, Bobby, our guest tonight Greg Palast. He reminds me of the old gumshoe detective
Mm-hmm.
uh, type person. Yeah, he wears the detective hat, and he comes through, and I really like that because if you're going to vote, you have to be curious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You have to be curious about your candidate. You have to be curious about the process. And I think that's one things that's missing is that we want this thing, we want this package well wrapped and perfect and given to us, and that's just not the way it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Mr. Palast, if I could, according to the Chicago Tribune, Palast is exactly what a journalist is supposed to be. He's a truth hound, doggedly independent, undaunted by power. His stories bite. They're so relevant, they threaten to alter history. Now that's quite a character. Mm-hmm.
And that's the power of the press, and that's why
Mm-hmm.
it is so important. Uh, in all of this, one thing I do know is certain is that we do have to be particular about our sources,
Mm-hmm.
those things that feed us. And just like good food, good information helps us grow. And bad information, just like bad food, man,
Yes,
it'll
sir.
break you down.
Make you sick on the stomach. Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so, so I approached this night with some satisfaction that the West Side Gazette, uh, a small paper by stature, uh, is willing to have this conversation when some larger, well-known media sources are running from it,
Mhm.
and that says a lot. And so uh, there's more for us, and so I encourage the citizens of Broward uh, and throughout the United States begin to seek some credible local sources that's going to feed you with good information. Because we've got enough crap out here. We eat enough bad fast food, uh,
Mhm.
and we don't need to carry that into our system of government. And so I am eternally grateful for this opportunity. I have been more of a spectator because I didn't want to miss this.
Mhm.
And so thank you. And so Bobby, I'm going to let you really have the night. You and Greg, uh, you guys are the real journalists.
No, man, you put a little pressure on me. Mr. Palace is quite the distinguished journalist. I was reading his stuff, and man, the brother is truly an independent journalist who don't mind stepping on people's toes.
Yeah.
Which I want to ask him. How many bodyguards you got, man? You know, who who's with you?
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well,
But
I see that he's here,
mhm.
and I know everyone wants to hear from him. They've heard enough from me. And so, without further delay, I would like to introduce uh, Greg Palast. And for those of you who don't know Greg, Greg is an award winning journalist. Uh, he has made some uncomfortable nights for a lot of people, uh, especially people in Florida.
Mhm.
And so, and so we're going
Yeah.
to, we are waiting to hear what he has to say because he has just broken some news recently. And so, Greg, it's all yours.
Oh, wow. What an honor to be with you. Can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I'm really thrilled to be back with you, Perry, and just great to be with you both. And we have some big news. And you're right. You won't read this in some of your lame stream there in Florida. They're going to run away from the news. For those who don't know me, I write. I in back in 2000, working for The Guardian and BBC television, I'm living in London and I'm seeing African Americans come before our cameras at BBC. And at the time, we were unusual because we showed black people who weren't criminals, right? So we knew that the type of media we have in the U.S. So I've seen African Americans come before the camera and say, "We couldn't vote. I couldn't vote," one after another. And I'm thinking in my head, wait, is there some type of computer program wiping out black voters in Florida? And then a couple of weeks later, I got in my hands 2 computer disks from a woman named Catherine Harris, your Secretary of State, who was also running the George Bush for President campaign. That was in 2000. And sure enough, in those computer disks were the names of 58,000 Americans come before Bush for wait, I'm getting it. In 2000, we had we had a list of 58,000 people, almost all of them African Americans. I'm not guessing because it says BLA next to your name and your registration, your races in Florida registrations. And it said these were ex-cons, felons who couldn't vote in Florida at the time until Prop 4. They couldn't vote in Florida. Well, it turns out I went through the list, name by name. We went through it. And there was not a single illegal ex-con voter on that list. The only crime of these voters was voting while black. And that's what made George Bush president. Catherine Harris wiping out black voters because George Bush became president by winning Florida by just 537 votes. I'm not talking about electoral votes. I'm talking about 537 ballots. That was it. After you wipe out tens of thousands of black people off the voter rolls, falsely accusing them of being felons. That's what happened. And you remember Al Gore protesting in the street, saying, "We're not going to give in until these black votes are counted." Oh, that didn't happen. I'm making that up. Okay. He said, "The hell with you guys." I don't care about you guys. He went to federal court to try to get some white votes counted, but that didn't happen. So, but the African-American voters who were excluded not just by the Republican Party, and their Catherine Harris and who's running the both Jeb Bush and the George Bush campaigns. Mm-hmm. And but it's not like the Democrats stood up and said, "Gee, that's was bad what happened to black people," because it happened to all of us. When your vote was taken away, our votes were canceled, and we got the wrong president, not chosen by the people, but chosen by Florida hacks from the Republican Party. That's what happened. That's 20 years ago. And how have things changed? Here we are, 2020. Agent Orange is president. And once again, we're facing this new Jim Crow tactic of wiping African-American voters of color, young people off the voter rolls. This week, or I should say last week, the ACLU issued a report by my team, by the Greg Palast Investigative Fund. I have a not-for-profit team of about 15 experts. It turns out the state of Georgia removed over 300,000 people from the voter rolls on the grounds that they left the state at the end of last year. Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't see hundreds of thousands of moving vans on the roads, did you? Not coming out of Atlanta. So did these people move? Well, I checked. And I didn't just check with anyone. I hired the United States Postal Service's licensee who is in charge of knowing where you move. I hired the top experts in what's called address list hygiene. It's a fancy word for saying we know where you live. That's Amazon, eBay, Federal Express, Home Depot. These are the companies that know exactly where you are because they can't misdeliver or send the wrong bill somewhere. They know where you are. And the post office and Amazon and the experts said the same thing. Almost 200,000 of the people on that list never moved anywhere. Their crime, most of them, was voting while black. That's what happened. So you just had the Georgia Republican Secretary of State remove 200,000 people on phony grounds. But the idea is to flip the state of Florida, because I'm going to tell you something. It's the state of Georgia. I've been in Georgia many times in the last couple of years. I'm going to tell you, if the census isn't messed with, you're going to find out that Georgia is at this time a white minority state. So what is the GOP going to do? There just ain't enough old white guys to reelect Donald Trump, or there's 2 Senate seats on the ballot. So they have to get rid of the non-white guys. Now, who did they remove? But, I just gave you a bunch of numbers. But Perry, it's not numbers, it's people. And let me tell you, let me show you something. Okay, if you go to gregpalace.com and see that report, you're going to see a woman on the cover. I was in an Atlanta voting station 2018, the first time I looked at their phony list. This is the purge list, people that they removed from the voter rolls, just like they removed the black voters of Florida in 2000. This case, I'm standing there, and my friend, the broadcaster from Atlanta, Raheem Shabazz, he goes in. They say, "You can't vote here. You've been removed from the voter rolls." Ashley Jones, a Latina who showed up with her daughter, threw her out. Jasmine Bakhtiar, a refugee from Iraq, threw her out. Now, and then finally, there's a woman hysterically crying in the corner because her aunt was just thrown out of the polling station saying she couldn't vote. Now, who was she? She was 92 years old. Christine Jordan is her name. 92. She was going there to vote for her 50th year, where she's been voting at the same schoolhouse for 50 years. They threw her out. They said, "You aren't registered here. You've left Georgia." Moved away. What? 92 years old. So I went to her home with her. This is the home that they said she'd moved out of. That's how she lost her vote. Well, I got to tell you, there was a picture of Martin Luther King on the wall having dinner with her in that very house. She's been there at least 50 years. I said, "You knew Martin Luther King?" Wow. She said, "Well, he was my cousin. He went to her house for dinner after church every Sunday." And they threw her off the voter rolls. But she said, "I will vote." She's fighting for her vote. Now, this week, then they removed 1/3 voters. And that's how Stacey Abrams, as Stacey Abrams said, citing the Greg Palast Fund work, she said, "Look, I won, but I won't be inaugurated because they stole these votes away from me. They stole Christine Jordan's vote away. They stole 1/3 votes away. People that they said moved, who never moved, one name after another." This is the trick that was being played in Georgia. But when they got away with it in 2018 and elected Brian Kemp over Stacey Abrams using this new Jim Crow trickery, they started rolling it across the country. Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, all these attacks on voters of color and young people, they're the new targets. And when I say voters of color, I got to tell you, Asian Americans are really getting killed in this election with purges and trickery of every type. And I got to tell you, I wrote a book, in case you haven't mentioned it yet. I'm going to show it to you. Now, it's called How Trump Stole 2020. Don't panic. It's not a prediction. It's a warning. How Trump Stole 2020. It's a warning because, yes, they did steal it because they've already done all these purges of the voter rolls in Florida, in Georgia, elsewhere. But we can steal it back. That is, we can bust the burglary. It's real simple. Some things, here's one thing I want everyone to do who's watching this. You're in a state where if you get caught voting while black, there's a very good chance that they're going to remove you from the voter roll. So what you got to do is you have to go online. You have to go to your county board of elections, look it up, or there's a site called vote.org, and see if you're still registered. And look, don't say, "Oh, I've been voting the same place 20 years, no problem." I want to remind you, Christine Jordan, King's cousin, 50 years at one voting station, and they got rid of her. So they can get rid of you. Easy. Check your registration, and and you got to do it now because we're coming to the deadline for registering. I don't know the exact date in Florida, but I know that it's October 3rd in Georgia. And if you're in Georgia, I want everyone to get this place to go, which is SaveMyVote2020.org. SaveMyVote2020.org. Anyone listening across the water there in Georgia, you're going to look that up and see if you are one of the 1/3 people purged, that is, had your registration canceled. You're not going to get that mail-in ballot if you're not on the voter rolls. We can do this. And I'm not talking about whether we can defeat Trump. That's a given. Just the demographics of America. If every American citizen is allowed to vote, we're going to have regime change. It's not whether I'm for or against Trump. I'm for Americans of any color choosing the president instead of the Jim Crow trickery choosing our president.
Mm-hmm.
So let's. What else you got in your mind? We're going to talk about this.
Yeah, you got some very
on and on. You got to stop it.
You got some very interesting chapters in your book. You know, I found them quite interesting. Some of the names of those chapters. You know, you are not guilty. The purge in general. You know, you got some. You add a little satire to the truth. You know, tell us a little bit about that. Because I really enjoyed it, and then we can get down to the real nitty gritty.
Okay, well, actually, there's a lot of things unusual about this book. You'll see, we have a comic. We have a comic book inside the book.
Yeah,
a 48-page comic book by Ted Rall. Now, why did they put in a comic book about something as horrible and frightening and ugly as vote suppression? Well, because there's wonderful books out there like The New Jim Crow and others, but it's not easy for most people to read through. I wanted to make it entertaining. It's kind of like reading a big comic book, but it's really, really serious investigative reporting, starting with what happened to Stacey Abrams in Georgia. By the way, I have an interview with Stacey Abrams in Georgia. And so I try to keep it entertaining. So, yeah. So if you look at some of the chapter names, The Poison Postcard, Schindler's Blacklist, Aliens Invade Kansas, Eric Crow, Jim Crow's liberal twin, James Brown voted 568 times, Voting Gangnam Style, The Rise of Kim Crow.
Right.
So I try to make it interesting. Some of it's very funny. A lot of people laugh out loud. I do. I still laugh at my own jokes. But I also, if you don't laugh at the beginning and cry at the end, well, I'll pay for your therapy. So how Trump stole 2020, again, it's not a prediction. It's a warning, and you can steal it back. And it's not that I'm trying to sell you books. I'm trying to sell you freedom from the slavery that's imposed by Jim Crow tactics. Because when they choose our leaders for us, they are enslaving us, right? When you don't choose the people that lead you, by definition, we become slaves. We're not going to accept that. That's, too much blood.
Yeah.
I
know one of the things I learned from you was really vote by mail and the whole research on direct marketing. Can you explain that?
Okay, so a few things. Number one, I know that there's a push to vote by mail, and I understand that. Police, if you're older, if you're at risk, if you're an old dude like me, you're going to have to vote remote. Or what I'm doing is I'm going in to my polling station for early voting midweek. There's no one there. Don't think of it election day. Think of it as election month. When does early voting begin in Florida? You know?
October, the end of October. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So we got to look at it.
It's 14 days before the election. So I would say, somewhere around October 18th or somewhere.
Right.
But here in Broward, we don't use the entire 14 days. We vote for 8 days. So you can only calculate the number of votes being lost in those 5 days.
Right. So now what we have to do is, if you're healthy enough, please go in, take your vote in midweek and early voting. Now, here's something else you can do. In most states, and I hope you can do it in Broward, you can try to get that mail-in ballot. If you do get it, you can drop it off at the county voting office. Okay, you can drop at the county election supervisor's office. Every county in Florida has an election supervisor's office. I just talked to the great dean of election supervisors, Ion Sancho. He's very worried about this election. So here's what you got to do. Make sure, look, the truth is mail-in voting is not safe. I'm sorry. I don't care what you've been told on MSNBC, okay? I know they want to tell you that it's okay to vote by mail. Here's the problem. It's not fraud. It's not what Agent Orange, our president, says, they're going to mail 1 million votes in from Venezuela. Come on. That ain't happening. What does happen, though, is that 1 in 5 votes that are mailed in are never counted. 1 in 5. Now, how does that happen? The answer, and that's from an MIT study, the answer is that about 1 in 10 ballots, about 1 in 10, if you ask for a mail-in ballot, you may not get it. Now, Florida, I know Broward is actually sending out notices to people, do you want a mail-in ballot? So you may have a better chance. But if you don't ask for that mail, if you want to mail in your ballot, you better ask for it right now, because I can tell you, for example, that the head of the Georgia ACLU, Andrea Young, Andy Young's daughter, she asked for a ballot 45 days in advance of the June primary. 45, a month and a half, okay? A month and a half ahead of the primary. Her husband's ballot arrived the day after the primary. And so here's what happens. You're going to not get your ballot. If you don't get your ballot, you're going to have to wait in that line and take a chance of getting the virus. Don't do that. Either ask for it really early, and if you don't get it 2 weeks before the election, you go into your Broward supervisor's office, county election supervisor's office, and pick up that ballot, fill it out right there, hand it to them, fill it out right there, hand it to them, and make sure that they ready for this phrase, verify your signature, because 141,000 people lost their mail-in ballots because some jerk challenged their signature. Now, we don't have 141,000 fraudulent forgers in the United States, professional forgers stealing your ballot. That's all nonsense. It's just a trick that they use. And you're going to have a bunch of, in Florida especially, you're going to have a bunch of boogaloo boys, some morons in their Hawaiian shirts, and you're going to have Proud Boys with their tattoos and guns, and they're going to be trying to disrupt the vote count, and they're going to be challenging every single vote. We had 100,000 people lose their vote because of postage due. And by the way, one thing about 1 in 8 mail-in ballots is challenged. That is, 1 in 8 mail-in ballots is never counted because someone says, oh, I don't like their signature, they didn't fill out all the forms. If it says put in your driver's license and you don't have a driver's license, put no driver's license, or make sure that you know all the rules for voting in Florida. I don't know, does Florida require you to mail in a photocopy of your ID with your mail-in ballot? Do you know?
No.
See, these are all these crazy rules. I got to tell you, about half the states require you to mail in an ID with your ballot. And don't use Scotch tape to seal it, for gosh sakes. Oh my God. You know that thousands of people lost their vote in New York in the primary because they put Scotch tape on their ballot because it got ripped or something. Don't put any extra marks on it. Don't fold it funny. And if your ballot gets torn, you're going to have to go into that election supervisor's office in Broward or wherever you are and ask for another ballot, because if you use your own, say, oh, I'll just use my own envelope. What's the difference? The difference is they're going to throw your vote out. Don't use lipstick or crayons or chocolate to mark your ballot. Use only a black or blue pen, period, nothing else. And if it says fill in the bubble, you know what? Fill in the bubble. Don't put an X or a smiley face. I mean, there's all these crazy things that are going to get your vote thrown out. So if you mail in your vote, you take a real chance your ballot will be thrown out. So if you can vote in person, vote early. Don't wait for election day. And there's another reason not to wait for election day. And I'm telling you this, I told you to check your registration. You forget to do that, you show up, you've been voting in the same place 20 years, big deal. Okay, I wait. Now you've waited in line 2 hours, it's election day. You get to the front and they say, you're not registered here. You say, well, I've been coming here for years. You're not registered here. Now you're losing your vote. Oh, but they'll tell you, this is what they'll tell you, Perry. They're going to say, oh, you get a provisional ballot. You don't worry. You can get a provisional ballot. Oh boy, don't take a provisional ballot. It's a placebo ballot. It's a fake out. Provisional ballots were created because of Florida. When I uncovered that thousands of African Americans were removed from the voter rolls illegally, the federal government passed a law saying that anyone removed wrongly from the voter rolls can get this special ballot so they can still vote. The problem is that the federal government gave you the right to get this ballot, but it's up to the state government, Mr. DeSantis, you know him. It's up to the state government to decide whether your ballot counts. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you're not registered, even if they removed you illegally in Florida, you fill out that provisional ballot, they're going to just throw it out. It's a placebo ballot. You think you voted, but you haven't. So don't accept a provisional ballot one way. And if you vote early, they try to give you one, come back. They say, oh, we don't like your ID, something like that. Make sure you have time to correct the problem. I'm giving you all the advice. It sounds like crazy. We have to do all this stuff just to vote. Yeah, you do. That's what you're going to have to do.
Yeah. Hey, Greg, in one of your chapters, you talk about the turd blossom freaks out. What tell me about that?
Turd blossom. Now, turd blossom is that's the name that President Bush Jr. W gave his hitman, a guy named Karl Rove. Now, Karl Rove is who sometimes called Bush's brain, but Bush called him Turd Blossom because he smelled so wonderful. Because of the way he operated. And let me give you an example of what he did, how his operation worked. It was Karl Rove who created something called caging. Now, and again, he did this in Florida. In 2004, I started getting these emails from Karl Rove, from his office, okay, from his assistant. Why would they send Greg Palast emails? Well, they didn't. What happened is someone in his office made a mistake and sent emails from Karl Rove's office to a site. Instead of saying georgebush.com, they sent emails to georgebush.org, and a friend of mine owned that site. So they started sending their internal secret emails to a site owned by a friend of mine. And what was on that site? A bunch of lists of voters. And it says, here's caging list 1, caging list 2, caging list 3. I said, what's caging list? Caging list. So then I spoke to some experts, and I spoke to Ian Sancho, your Tallahassee election supervisor at the time. He said, oh my God, this is a caging list. This is a violation of federal law. What it is, they were sending letters to African-American and Hispanic airmen at the Naval Air Station at Jacksonville. And if they sent you a letter and it said, do not forward, it was like first-class mail, sometimes registered first-class mail, do not forward. If that letter came back, they challenged your vote because they said, oh, you weren't really at your registration. This is your fake voter. Now, wait a minute. They sent it to the Naval Air Station, the home address of Black soldiers who were in Afghanistan, Hispanic soldiers who were in Iraq. So in other words, go to Iraq, lose your vote, mission accomplished. So that's what happened. Thousands of African Americans lost their vote because they were challenged by the GOP. And by the way, those were mail-in ballots that were lost. And this is the tragedy. A lot of soldiers mailed in their ballots from Afghanistan. And, you can vote from Afghanistan if you're an American citizen, you're serving in the U.S. military, right? They sent in their ballots, and then they didn't get counted because back home, and by the way, that was in Broward County too. Back home, they were throwing out your ballot because they said you didn't really exist you didn't really live in Florida. So this is a game that Karl Rove, Bush's brain, Turd Blossom, was playing. He's done other ugly tricks, including forcing people who vote early to vote on an absentee ballot, which again they can challenge. You got to be very careful. But these are the tricks they play. So be ready for them. Don't get caught standing. Even without COVID, as you know, in Florida and Broward, we had gigantic lines. And don't be stuck with those lines. Either carefully mail in your ballot now, or again, fill it out, get the ballot, you get it, fill it out properly, walk it into the voting office. Are you going to have drop boxes, do you know, in Broward for the ballots?
The post office don't pick them up.
I mean, and take them in the office. I know in Georgia, for example, in California, I can walk into any polling station with a mail-in ballot and say, here's my ballot, and they just put it in the box. They won't do that in Georgia. You have to go to a special place to drop off a ballot. I don't know the rules in Florida. And that's the problem. Every state has crazy rules. And some of them are crazier than others. And some of them are not just crazy. They're vicious. They're racist. It's Jim Crow tactics to bend the election.
Mhm.
Be careful out there.
Yeah, yeah. Um, there was something in your book that caught my attention. The post checkpoint? Um,
Cross checkpoint.
cross checkpoint. There we go.
Oh,
There
yeah.
we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a chapter in the book called, and again, the book is How Trump Stole 2020. Again, we can steal it back. Don't worry. Don't panic. There's a chapter called 568 James Browns. Now, what's that about?
Take it to the
A
bridge.
guy named Chris Kobach of Kansas. Chris Kobach of Kansas. If you can't remember that name, just think KKK. Chris Kobach, and by the way, Chris Kobach of Kansas is a proud white supremacist, and he was the Secretary of State of Kansas. He just ran for Senate. But Chris Kobach of Kansas created something called the cross-check list. And then he sent it out to 30 Republican secretaries of state and said, this is a list of people who are voting twice, voting in your state and voting in another state. He got all the Republicans to put their voting list together. And believe it or not, you may not believe this, but there's a guy named James Brown in Atlanta who voted. And there's a guy named James Brown in Detroit who voted. They said, obviously, it's the same person, James Brown. I mean, how common a name is that? Certainly not common for a Democrat or for a Republican, right? So they literally removed 568 Georgia voters named James Brown. And then they removed dozens of voters named James Brown in Detroit, dozens of voters named James Brown in Baltimore, in Phoenix, and in many other states. Now, what's going on here? So they're saying it's all the same voter. And I got to tell you, if you look, the book actually shows the list. See, they kept it secret, but I got it. See this hat? This means I'm an investigative reporter. I got the inside information. I got the lists, and they said James Edward Brown is the same voter as James Thomas Brown. And James Brown Sr. is the same voter as James Brown Jr. And they removed all the James Browns. So this is the trick that they're playing. So James Brown, every James Brown in Georgia, about half of them showed up at the polls and were told you can't vote or you have to have a provisional ballot. Same in Michigan. Now, here's the interesting thing. In Michigan, Donald Trump supposedly won by 10,700 votes, but they removed over 50,000 voters of color named James Brown and John Johnson, and you get the picture. And also people named Jose Garcia and people named David Kim. Because here's the trick. When you're using common names, that's Jim Crow, because according to the census, 85 of the 100 most common names in America, Black, Johnson, Rodriguez, Garcia, Kim, Chung, Wong, 85 of the 100 most common names in America are minority names, ethnic minority names. And they know that means what color they are, and their color is blue. These are generally Democratic voters. That's what they hate. See, because Jim Crow has transformed. It's gone away from people who hate black people to people who just hate the color of your vote. And they're the more dangerous ones because they're the ones that are sharp and using computers, and they don't shout, oh, segregation now and forever. They say, oh, we want everyone to vote. They're lying. They're lying. We caught them. And so the ACLU issued a report last week catching Brian Kemp's successor in the new Jim Crow trickery. Florida today, you just saw the ruling from the court, from the Florida court, saying that despite the overwhelming decision of the public to say that people who serve their time can vote, they took it away by saying 700,000 people in Florida who still from 30 years ago, you got busted for a couple joints in your pocket and you still owe $400 in court fees. Now you can't vote. So you have to buy your right to vote if you can even find it. Now, by the way, many of you would know, I've worked in, again, I was investigating in Florida. How do you even find out if you owe money? These records are 34 years old. They don't even exist anymore. So basically it's another Jim Crow trick. 700,000 voters, and 88% of them, by the way, 88% are Democrats. You tell me whether we're holding a democratic election in the United States of America. I don't think so. But don't worry. If you're aware of this stuff, you can steal it back.
Hmm. Okay.
And now Florida, by the way, was not in cross. It used these other tricks, like purging the voter rolls in very suspect ways. In fact, I'm trying to get, if anyone's listening and has the Broward County purge list, send it to gregpalast.com. By the way, if you want to read any of my reports besides I obviously want you to read the book, How Trump Stole 2020, so you can steal it back. But you can also go to gregpalast.com, GREGPALAST, gregpalast.com, and read these reports. And also, at the back of the book and at the website, something very, very important, something very special for safe voting. Let's see if you can see this. The ballot condom. So I have a ballot condom in the book, and it's on my website. No, you don't slip it over the ballot. But what you do is read the 7 steps to protect your vote. Make sure you can vote. And step 1 is, again, check your registration at vote.org, or check, if you're in Georgia, just go to gregpalast.com. Otherwise, vote.org.
Hey, Greg? What is this? The red shift is coming. The red shift is coming. What's that?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, here's something weird. Back in 2004, as you know, it came down to the state of Ohio. And John Kerry running against Bush, who was unpopular because of the war in Iraq. So it came down to Ohio. And the exit polls said that John Kerry had defeated George Bush among women by 53% to 47%. He won with 53% of the vote. And John Kerry won among men with 51% of the vote. Then they declared George Bush winner of Ohio and the presidency. Well, wait a minute. What's the third sex that put Bush over the top? How did that happen? How could Kerry win amongst men, win amongst women, but together, men and women together, he lost? How does that happen? The answer is Jim Crow. The answer is that they took the African-American ballots especially out of Columbus, out of Cleveland, out of Dayton, and they started disqualifying those ballots. That's a little trick that we don't know, that we don't talk about in America. According to the federal government, voting officials rejected 1.9 million votes. That's the federal government's own count, that they took your vote and threw it away. 1.9 million of these votes, especially in Ohio. That's how Bush became president. Now in 2016, we saw it again, the red shift. Now in Wisconsin, Hillary Clinton, on the morning of the election, the polls said that she was ahead by 6%. That's pretty comfortable. That's a landslide. Then at the end of the day, they had exit polls. And there, Hillary Clinton won by 4%. That's still a pretty comfortable margin. But they said that Donald Trump won the state. So wait a minute. Hillary Clinton, by the polls in the morning, 6%, 4%, whatever. How does Trump win? That's called the red shift. What that means is exit polls are an honest, very honest rendering of what voters think. Because unlike regular polls where, you don't know if someone's going to vote or change their mind, if someone's just walked out of a polling station, they can tell you who they voted for. So exit polls are the gold standard of the real outcome of an election. And when I say the gold standard, the United States State Department determines if foreign elections are fair if the official results match the exit polls. If they don't, we don't certify other nations' elections. Ukraine, Peru, Serbia, all these elections, the United States government refused to accept. Why? They refused to accept those elections because the exit polls said one candidate won, but the government said, oh, no. This is what happened. So in Wisconsin and in Michigan and in Pennsylvania, Hillary Clinton won and won comfortably, according to the exit polls. So the State Department says she's the winner, but not in America. We don't apply our own rules in the United States. And somehow magically, Trump wins Michigan, right? How does Trump win the Motown, right? He supposedly wins in Motown. He wins Wisconsin with Milwaukee and Madison, right? How does that happen? Now, here's how it happens. So it's called redshift. So then I flew to Michigan and Milwaukee to try to find out, well, wait a minute. How come the polls say Hillary Clinton won, but Trump is named the winner, and that gave him the presidency? How'd that happen? I go to Detroit. There's a chapter called Michigan, Michigas.
Michigan.
Gas, right? So if you live in Florida, you know what that is. Now, I go there, and I go to Detroit, where there are 75,355 ballots. 75,000 ballots have never been counted in Detroit to this day. 75,000 uncounted ballots, 75,355 to be exact. Now, why weren't they counted? Because voting machines broke down in Detroit. 87 voting machines broke down in Detroit. When those 87 voting machines broke down, people came in, they had paper ballots, but they have to be run through a scanner to read the ballot, right? So the scanner broke. So voters were telling me, I talked to some of the voters who were there, like one guy named Carlos Garcia. And he said, look, I stood there for 2 hours and watched as people filled out their ballots. Instead of putting it through the machine where they'd be counted, they were put behind the machine. Why? Because the counter was broken. Now, so what do you do if a machine breaks down? The answer is you read it by hand. You look at it. Human eye never breaks down or rarely breaks down, right? Well, Trump went to court and stopped the count of those votes. So you had 75,000 votes in Detroit never counted. Trump supposedly wins by just 10,000 votes out of 5 million. Now, if you counted the votes in Detroit, you tell me who won Michigan. You tell me who was really elected president of the United States. It's not whether you like Hillary or not. She was elected, and then they stole it from her. And that's what we have to worry about again and again. But I want to give you one bit of hope on here. In fact, I want to give you not a bit of hope. I want to give you a ton of hope. Dig this. Despite all the tricks in Michigan, which was controlled by the Republican Party, despite all that tricks, the Republican regime was thrown out in Michigan. And they used every Jim Crow trick to win Wisconsin and keep it Republican. Nevertheless, the people of Wisconsin rose up and threw Scott Walker, this Republican, Republican who's I'm going to say the word racist only because I don't know what his emotions are. I just know the effect of what he did, which is to remove black voters from the voter rolls. Nevertheless, there was such an uprising against this nonsense that he was thrown out. And by the way, there's now a wonderful African American lieutenant governor who is, as we're speaking, is giving a talk now, Mandela Barnes. And so, you know what the good thing is? It's that they can't steal all the votes all the time. They can't steal every vote. And that's important to know. You can overcome the steal. You can overwhelm the steal. Yeah, there's going to be vote theft. They're going to steal votes from African Americans, any voter of color, young people especially. They're going to steal your vote. Yeah. But they can't steal every vote. And so you can still let the voters win.
Yeah. Now, as far as the cross-check, how many states are still using it? Because I know they disbanded the program, but there are still states that use parts of it. If so, where are those states?
Well, believe it or not, Virginia, even though it's under Democratic control. It's crazy. You'll see Democratic states that flip to the Democratic column will sometimes continue the Republican Jim Crow tactics because they don't understand them. Remember, these guys are sophisticated. They don't leave notes around saying, oh, let's remove all the black voters. They don't do that stuff anymore. It's far more sophisticated. Say, oh, we're just removing the double voters. We had people voting in Virginia and people voting in North Carolina. No, you didn't. That didn't happen because if that happened, you would have arrested them. But still, the Democrats keep it going in Virginia. They're using the old list created by Mr. KKK of Kansas. And but mostly it's GOP states that are still using that list. Because of our work, stories I wrote in Rolling Stone and elsewhere, the cross-check program was in fact shut down. So they're not creating any new lists. The problem is some people are still losing their votes from old lists, which is why I'm telling you right now, go to vote.org while we're talking, see if you are still registered. And I don't care if you've been registered same place 20 years, check it again. And I got to tell you that here in California, which everyone thinks is cool dudes, right? Greg Palast, I checked my vote and I was missing. So I re-registered. And if you go to vote.org and you're missing, you follow the link. It's very important. So I would have lost my vote if I hadn't checked. Very important that you check.
Yeah. Now, I know we talk about the cross-check in terms of eliminating voters, but we had a very interesting incident that happened right after the George Floyd murder. That particular cop, we later found out, was actually voting here in Florida.
Oh.
And so one of the things that I considered, because you were the one who really broke open how the cross-check worked in terms of property records and how they were looking, do you think that possibly the voter cross-check was also moving voters around? Because Chauvin was in Minnesota and Republicans had no way of winning Minnesota. So let's take a vote out of Minnesota and put it in Florida.
I'm going to suppose that he was still playing game, had some type of connection to Florida to use that for a vote, because they don't actually check the real records for cross-check. They literally look at common names. They just say, John Black, James Brown, David Kim. They just use the first and last name. That's all they use to say if you were voting in two places. But see, he was smart because he was only voting in Florida, not Minnesota. So see, they can be they're not really going after double voters. They're not really going after illegal voters because they'd bust that guy. Right? If they wanted to go after illegal voters, go find illegal voters, put them in handcuffs and read them their rights. But you're going to end up with cops from Minnesota as opposed to Willie Steen of Florida. Willie Steen of Tampa, Florida, he was matched with a guy named Willie Osteen of Ohio. And it even says on the records that Willie Osteen is white and Willie Steen of Florida, who lost his vote, is black. Willie Steen of Florida never got a parking ticket, and yet he was removed because he was a felon. This is the type of crazy matching that they do, and they know why they're doing it. Okay, so they're not going to get some white cop from Minnesota. They're going to get a Gulf War veteran like Willie Steen, who's never had a traffic ticket, and throw him off the voter rolls. That's how they're playing it. So, but again, I don't want to make people scared to vote. Listen, they can't steal all the votes all the time. And as you know, look, Obama took the state. It wasn't easy. Believe me. In fact, I talked, when I was working in Rolling Stone, we called Obama and said, "Do you know about this stuff?" Now, I'm going to say I didn't think that Obama was very aggressive in protecting the vote, and I tell you why. But he gave us his reasoning. He said, "Overwhelm the steal." I said, "They stole 5.8 million votes from you." And his response was, "Then you need 7 million votes to overcome them. That's all. You need 7 million more people." So you can overwhelm the steal. Now, I think you got to do a lot more to protect voters. But you're not going to be able to protect voters unless you grab control of the government to fix it. And the only way to grab control of the government to fix it while they're in control, while DeSantis is in control and Agent Orange is in the White House, you're just going to have to overwhelm the steal, vote early and vote smart by making sure your ballot gets counted and checking your registration, making sure your ballot is filled out absolutely perfectly to the details that they demand. As crazy rules follow everyone. If you're in Wisconsin, by the way, you're going to have a witness signature. If you're listening in Alabama, you're going to need 2 witness signatures, or you're going to have to get your ballot notarized, which is completely nuts. There's all these crazy rules, and I'm sure Florida has its own crazy rules. Please, if you get a mail-in ballot, follow the rules exactly. That's important. And if you're going to mail in your vote, first of all, try to take it in, not mail it in. There's a Jim Crow alligator in every mailbox, and it didn't start with Trump. This has been a problem. The post office is a very bad polling station. It's not designed for it. Okay, and if you take your ballot in, I don't know if Florida has pre-stamped ballots. If it does, then when you go you don't put it in a mailbox. You're going to need it postmarked. Are you ready for this? If you mail in your ballot, take it to the post office and ask that it be postmarked. If you're an old cat like me and you're at risk, you don't want to go to the post office, give it to someone else and tell them to have it postmarked. And when you go to the window, now you say, why postmark? Because a lot of states, and I think Florida is one of them, if you mail in your ballot, you have to have it postmarked by election day. Well, isn't that automatic? Not at all. You get a lot of letters without postmark. So you got to be very careful that your letter, if you're going to mail it, take it to the post office, get it postmarked.
Yeah. In Florida, it has to be in the election office by 7 o'clock. So postmark has no bearing on vote by mail ballots here.
So it's for Florida, it's when it arrives. Well, assume that the post office is going to be flooded. So it's best to take it right to the office yourself or have someone take it to the office for you.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, we had several ballots during the presidential primary in March that were rejected because people dropped their vote by mail ballots at their local precinct. And even though the precinct did take them there at the end of the night, they were rejected because they were not in the election office by 7. And it sounds pretty strange, but why is not the precinct? But that is the law. It has to be in the election office by 7. And so we had I think close to a dozen ballots that were rejected on that simple technicality that people dropped them off at the precinct on election day.
And don't forget this time, you're going to have the Boogaloo boys out there and the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and all those white supremacist organizations who will be in the polling station challenging your vote for every little thing. Oh, it came in 2 minutes late. Oh, you had an extra mark on the ballot. Oh, you left off your middle initial when you signed it. You put a return address, which is different than your registration address. All kinds of cockamamie stuff to knock out your ballot. So be super careful if you do a mail-in ballot. That's why I do recommend, if you can, safely vote early. Go in and vote early if you can.
Okay, all right.
Yes, hi, good evening, Mr. Gray. We're so grateful to have you on air, and of course, everyone that's watching live from home. We do have a question from Facebook. Jerry Odom asks, if you find out your state is participating in cross-check, is there a way to challenge it?
Yeah, raise hell. There's no other way to do it. I did op-eds with the great Gary Flowers, who was works with Reverend Jackson. Reverend Jackson, Jesse Jackson, and myself have been on this campaign against cross-check for years and have busted it out in several states, starting with his own state of Illinois. So we've been on a campaign to get every state we can off it. And I have to say that the League of Women Voters and the ACLU helped bring it down in Kansas, which was sending out the list. So there's no more lists going out because even the Republican Party, once it was exposed, said, ooh, that's kind of icky. We're going to stay away from it. And besides, we don't want to get sued. So, but there's still some states in it, not Florida. Florida got out of it. We did get it out of Florida, but there's still other tricks in Florida, and some states are again using those old lists. Not Florida. You'll be happy to know.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Other
countries interfering. You got a chapter rushing to judgment. You want to enlighten us on that?
You know what? We'd all like to say that the election was stolen not by Americans stealing votes from Americans through Jim Crow tactics. We don't want to talk about race in America, as you know. So instead, we make up this fantasy island nonsense about the Russians stealing the votes. Well, I've investigated quite a bit here. But did Russia want to bend the election for Donald Trump? Yeah, they certainly did. Putin said right up front, Donald Trump was my man. But I can't really say it was Trump who stole it. Look at DeSantis. Look at your state government for stealing the vote. Look at Brian Kemp of Georgia stealing the vote. Look at the GOP in Michigan stealing the vote. The Republican legislature, Scott Walker in Wisconsin, stealing the vote. And none of them, as far as I know, speak Russian.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is so we'd love, look, it would be nice to say we didn't do this to ourselves. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
But it's not true. We did it. Americans did it to Americans. And it's mostly these Republican officials doing it to people of color. And it's about time that we called it out. It's not Russians that just eliminated 313,000 voters from the voter rolls of Georgia. That didn't come from Russia. Okay, I'm sorry, it didn't. I wish I could say it was not us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think to that point that it is when we look at our elections. Yes, on the physical side, we do see those tactics, but our elections are very technically driven, and we have not given the type of audit and the look at our technical systems. So while we do know the traditional suppressive actions, we also have found out on the back end that there has been a dismantling of votes as well, even after the polls close. Now,
Yes.
I won't say that that's Russian. I definitely not saying that that's Russian, but it does open our elections to another sphere that we do now have to give some thought to.
Yes.
And sometimes it's just not as clear.
Well, let me give you a couple Florida examples. You guys are bad news, I got to tell you. This is bad news when it comes to voting. But in Florida, in 2000 in Jacksonville, 29,000 ballots were rejected from the city of Jacksonville, within Jacksonville, not the county. 29,000 ballots because there was a disaster with the voting machines. Now, they could have read those ballots by eye. Those are punch card ballots. You know, they had little chads. You know what a chad is, by the way? People made fun of the chads in Florida. It's when you had you punched your candidate's name, punched a hole next to your candidate's name. That's pretty clear. But what you didn't know is that a little piece of cardboard was stuck to the back. So the machine kicked it out because it said, there's some weird thing on it. There's a bug on it. There's a piece of paper. So the machine kicks it out. Big deal. Well, the human eye can look at a hole. You hold it up to a light and you got the candidate. That's what Catherine Harris, the Republican Secretary of State, stopped the hand count. She lost 29,000 ballots in Jacksonville. And when you talk about computers, okay, here's one of the big tricks that they play. It's not so much playing with the software and changing your vote. They do something far less subtle. In Sarasota, when Catherine Harris is running for Congress, they asked experts what kind of voting machines they should have. They said paper ballots with scanner readers, that's what you want to have. And so, of course, the Republicans said, well, now we're not going to have that because that's too easy to vote. We're going to go to computers. And what happened in Sarasota, Tampa area, is that in several black precincts, the machines simply crashed. All the votes were lost. Boom. In the white precincts, the machines worked fine. A lot of that was for the fact that in white areas, when you're using computers, they're often in air-conditioned schools and air-conditioned, golf club, country clubs, and in expensive churches with air conditioning. So the machines work fine. You go into areas without air conditioning, machines start breaking down. They know this will happen. They know it will happen. The machines break down. They say, we don't know who these people voted for. We don't know who these people voted for. Well, yeah, you do. An African-American precinct, you don't know how they voted. So what happens is the machine crashes and there's nothing, you can't recover those votes. So yeah, so and then Florida, there was an outcry, and you went again to paper ballots, which is good. But again, be careful because they put it in the machine. If it's not read correctly, it kicks it out, and you got to make sure that your ballot has been counted. Now, I believe and hope that in Broward you have the machines that if you can test your ballot and see if it's working. I'm not sure if they still have that, but again, that only works if you increase.
Yeah, with the DS200s, but here, the fight in Florida has gotten a little more in depth because while we are talking about the paper ballot, if we understand the process, once you scan that paper ballot, that digital image is essentially your record of vote because that is what gets tabulated, not the not the paper ballot. And so we found out recently that several of our counties do not retain those ballot images. John Brakey, John Brakey recently was in a lawsuit, audit elections. And so while John's lawsuit attacked it, essentially the lawsuit settled around the fact that if there's a runoff, well, if there is a recount of the presidential election, of the presidential race, ballot images will be saved for that recount, only for the presidential race, but not for any other race.
If that's the same, so you're saying presidential because that's under federal law,
right? But if you understand, but if you understand, Trump won by 1.2%. Automatic recount is 0.5, so that 0.7 was just enough. So if you look at 112,000 votes, you can probably get that vote right here in Broward, or for sure between Broward and Palm Beach.
Well, I got to tell you, in How Trump Stole 2020, there's that book again. There is a chapter called The Amnesia Machines. And I know John Brakey is very, very sharp, and I work with one of the lawyers who does work with him in Ohio. I went in, and all these machines you can set them. There's just a lever. You just hit a button, and it will save the ballot images. Well, why? You get a receipt when you go to an ATM, and your vote for president is far more important. Your vote for senator is far more important. Your vote for, in fact, the most important vote, I got to tell you, is probably your state legislature. You have an awful state legislature, and you got to do something about that. So of course they know that, and people know that, so they're going to try to change that legislature. So they don't want to have ballot images because there's a lot of games that can be played in the dark. So I call it the amnesia machines. Now, am I saying that they stole the vote by turning off the image thing? The copy of the ballot so that you can't recount it? Well, I don't know because I can't look into the computer's brain, but I'm going to ask you this question. Why are you covering up a crime if you didn't commit it?
Right.
Why are they turning off the ballot image? Why? Right. The only reason could be mischief. And so again, now I know I'm scaring people. They're going to say, "Oh, it's all stolen. I can't. There's no sense voting." Yeah, there is a sense because they can't steal all the votes all the time. And you can overwhelm the steal. It's been done in Florida. Obama did it twice. He won Indiana. But that's why they ended up with all these games to stop Americans from voting.
Wow.
Yeah. Pretty sobering. What coming into these last 8 weeks, what are some of the particular areas that you're looking at? Or would you suggest that we should be really paying close attention to, and not the distractions about what's going on with the Joe at the post office? Although it is important, it is a distraction because ultimately the ballot box is where we should be paying our attention.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've gone kind of, look, Trump is the great distractor. He's brilliant at it, right? And then, he says something stupid, like, oh, I didn't tell people about how bad COVID was. Boom, we're distracted again. Okay, he's brilliant at pulling these stunts. Attacking victims of police violence, attacking the victims as if they were the perpetrators. And it's ugly, horrible stuff. But we got to say, okay, we're not going to let him distract us. We have to keep our eye on fair elections, because if the elections are fair, we're going to have regime change. He knows it. So in Florida, be very careful. You got to check your registration. You got to make sure that you fill out your ballot correctly. And then we need something else. I'd like people to start thinking about working as poll watchers. I know it's difficult. We're going to need young people if you're healthy, and that's not a guarantee that you're going to stay safe. But remember, guys like me can't work the polls. I'm over 60, right? I'd be in danger. I had heart surgery. I have one lung. So I can't work at the polls. That's the death sentence. So someone's got to work at the polls. Otherwise, you're going to have lines forever. But not just on election day, my friends. Please, we need people who will be certified as poll watchers for the 2 to 3 weeks following the election while they're opening up the mail-in ballots. It's going to be 2 or 3 weeks, and here's why. Because those Boogaloo boys with their Hawaiian shirts, these racist pinheads, and there's no other way to describe them, and they are violent, will be in there doing two things: challenging every vote, and frankly, trying to cause mayhem to shut down the vote. Now, back in 2000, Roger Stone, the Nixon's trick boy and Donald Trump's buddy, who he just let out of prison. This guy is a criminal. He's a violent criminal. And he just got a get out of jail free card. He ran what was called the Gucci riot back in 2000, where you had all these expensive consultants who ran into the Miami-Dade clerk's office and the election supervisor's office and started, wrecking things, slamming the windows, etc. And so they shut down the vote because it was dangerous with these nuts there. And then Catherine Harris, your Republican Secretary of State, said, well, that's it. If you didn't count the ballots, time's up. Because of that, George Bush became president. Now, don't expect them to do this again. We're going to have to be ready for violence and be able to stop the violence, not respond to the violence with violence. I'm very concerned. My biggest concern is violence in Florida. I think we're going to have violence in Florida, Miami-Dade, Jacksonville. I think we're going to have violence in Milwaukee and in Detroit as they are stopping the votes and trying to stop the count. Don't let them do it, but don't respond to the violence. Violence, that's what they want, because then it gets shut down. Then the feds will come in, and Trump's federal police with their black cars, they're going to start arresting. Who are they going to arrest? Are they going to arrest the Proud Boys? They're going to arrest Roger Stone again? No, they're going to arrest you. So keep it calm, make it calm, and don't give up. And when they are screaming and hollering and threatening, and they're slamming the windows with sticks and breaking windows and causing mayhem, you keep counting the vote. You keep counting the vote.
Wow.
I have a quick question from Q Snyder. He says, do poll watchers fall under the Whistleblower Act? Even as a poll watcher, what's the procedure process to claim foul or see the problem corrected?
Two things. I don't know if it's covered by the Whistleblower Act, because it seems like it would. I'd need a lawyer on this one who's familiar with this, because you are temporarily a government agent and you're being paid by the government, by the way. If you are a poll worker, if you're a poll watcher assigned by one of the parties or an independent poll watcher, you're not part of the government. The whistleblower law doesn't apply. But what does apply is you have the right as a poll watcher when they're challenging a vote. And I saw the GOP challenge every single hand-counted ballot in Michigan. Every single one. Every single one. So you have to challenge the challenges. And when they say, oh, I don't like that signature, say, what's the basis for that? No, you must count that ballot. So you're going to have to, right on the spot, be challenging the challenges. And they say, oh, that has Scotch tape on it. So what? That's an American who cast a ballot. You know the voter's intent should rule, and you're going to fight for that and say, count that ballot. Yeah, and it's going to be endless legal fights. It's going to be a big problem. The biggest problem we're going to have in Florida is I believe Florida, you have to certify the vote count by November 30. And the Electoral College is December 14. And what we don't want is a failure to count the vote by November 30, because then your legislature is either going to pick the winner, as they did in 2000. By the legislature, by the way, your legislature certified Bush as the winner, even though all the ballots weren't counted. I'm afraid of that again, that they're going to say Trump won, even though all the ballots aren't counted. Or there's another possibility. It's pretty dark. God, it's terrible information I'm giving you. But if there's violence and the vote doesn't get counted, the Florida legislature, instead of saying, oh, the votes go to Trump, they might say it goes to no one. We're not sending anyone to the Electoral College because we couldn't, because of all the violence and all. They're going to say vote fraud, mail-in vote fraud, all these ballots from Venezuela. It's baloney. You might have a post office burnt down. Who knows what's going to happen? They will say, no, we're not going to certify any electors, anyone to send to the Electoral College on December 14th. Now, if no one gets 270 electoral votes, it goes to Congress, to the House of Representatives. And you say, oh, great, then Nancy Pelosi just says it's Biden. No, no, no. It's one state, one vote. There are 26 Republican delegations. They have the majority. And so if it goes to the House, Trump's reelected under the 12th Amendment procedure of the Constitution. Not many people have ever even heard of the 12th Amendment because we've never really used it. But that's what could happen. I'm very afraid of that. So keep the vote, the count going, no matter what. Press to have the count completed. Don't let them challenge every mail-in ballot. So we need a lot of people to stay as poll watchers, not for a day, not for 2 days, but for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, until November 30th. Believe me, you'll be counting ballots to November 30th.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But again,
it's not overwhelming. No. We can do this.
And when you consider, that the GOP has really stacked it on their sides, even in Democratic counties like Broward, we have a Republican election supervisor, and even in the state of North Carolina, where the governor can change the election supervisors, he has chosen not to, and majority of the election supervisors in North Carolina are Republican. And so, and then when you go to the courts, they've already sacked the courts. So yeah, we've got a good fight.
Yeah, but we've never run from a good fight. Never.
Well, Brother Bobby, you got it exactly, because look, it was never easy. I remember, I was in Selma. I did a film called The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. Mm-hmm. I was filming in Selma and talking to some of the people that marched with King over that bridge. Who, in fact, Linda Lowry, who was nearly beaten to death. In fact, she was thought dead. She was put in a hearse. She was a kid. She was like 12 years old. And they thought that she was beaten to death. They put her in a hearse, and suddenly she woke up and ran out of the hearse. Wasn't dead. And she ran back over the bridge into trouble. So that's what the spirit of Linda Lowry, this woman this young kid who not only jumped up out of a hearse, but actually ran back into the fight, into the tear gas, into the guys on horses with billy clubs. She ran in there. So if she could do that, I think we could stay around a couple weeks watching ballots being counted. What do you think?
Absolutely. You had a chapter. Wisconsin eats its own. What's that about, Greg? What's that?
That's the issue of excuse me, of voter ID. I want you to be very, very aware of the voter ID laws of Florida. I don't know the exact rules. Every state has their own crazy rules, and the GOP states have insane rules. So, for example, in Wisconsin, 2 weeks. Now, remember, Trump supposedly won Wisconsin by just 22,000 votes out of 3 million, a fraction of a percent. But how did that happen in Wisconsin? You've got this huge university University of Wisconsin, with 182,000 students in it. All right. And you've got Milwaukee, which is an African-American city overwhelmingly. Now, what happened to that vote? How could Trump win Wisconsin? The answer is 2 weeks before the 2016 election, they changed the voting, the ID laws requiring that you have an active state photo ID. Now, the first thing you say, well, students have that. No. They said you could use your gun permit, but you can't use your student ID. So they immediately wiped out tens of thousands of students who could have voted, who lost their vote. And then in Milwaukee, and they said, oh, well, you can use your driver's license. Well, you know what? In Milwaukee, a lot of people don't have cars. They use public transport. They can't afford a car. If you don't have a car, you're probably not going to have a license. So according to University of Wisconsin students, University of Wisconsin State, 50,000 African Americans instantly lost their vote. 50,000 African Americans lose their vote. At least that many students lose their vote. And yet Donald Trump is declared winner of Wisconsin by 22,000. Now, oh, that's terrible, Wisconsin, those cheese eaters. What about Florida?
Yeah.
In Florida, you've had a fight because the state has blocked most colleges from having, they make it very, very difficult to have voting on campus. So, for example, you have Miami-Dade, the community college, 110, yeah, you have 110,000 students there. They didn't even have a single voting station there. It's a city by itself without a single voting station, without one. Okay. And so then you had some students working with the Andrew Goodman Foundation. I want to give them an up. You had some students who actually protested, who brought suits and got the right to have, you now have a right to have a voting station on a college campus as long as the supervisor permits it. So in most areas, you're blocked from having voting on campuses. In a lot of your schools, you have some of the biggest schools in America, and they don't have a campus. You have to like take how are the students going to get out and take the cab, et cetera? And a lot of them, of course, now you've got students who are not at their schools, and so they're going to have to vote by mail because they've gone home, and they're going to have to go by mail. Or what I would recommend to students, re-register right now where you're living, so you don't have to have any problems getting your mail-in ballot, because you're going to have a hell of a problem getting your mail-in ballot. I would, if I were a student and you're working and you're living and studying remotely, right now, re-register at your current address so you can get a mail-in ballot. Make sure that you have ID which shows that address, like if you move back home with your parents or something like that, or you moved in with some friends. Make sure you have something that shows that you live there, like an electric bill, anything. And it's hard for students because they go home and it's the electric bill's in their parents' name, right? Mm-hmm. But you're going to have to come with ID, or you're just going to have to, because the student vote is being crushed in Florida. I'm very, very concerned about that. So students, you got a job to do. This is your final. Think of this as your democracy SAT. Re-register right now, wherever you are right now. And if you're a college student, not only re-register, but I want to sign up to be a poll watcher.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Very good. Yeah. Well, you have a quote in your book by the hardest working man in show business, James Brown, where he said, "Take it to the bridge." And so we're at that point where we have to take it to the bridge. There's no turning around here. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. So as dire again as it may seem, Greg, what is your should I say rally cry for saving our electoral process? What would you tell us?
Okay, you have to save your own democracy. Don't expect the Democratic Party or anyone else to save your vote for you. You save your vote. You save your vote. In fact, if you're in Georgia, you go to SaveMyVote2020.org. You are responsible for your vote. look, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be as simple as pick and lick. You pick a candidate and you lick the stamp and you send it in. You got to be really careful. You got to make sure you're registered. You got to make sure you fill out the ballots right. You got to do this for your friends. And if you may have to re-register if you're not at your school address or whatever. Please, yeah, it's not going to be easy, but you don't have to march 50 miles from Selma to Montgomery to win the vote. You may have to march 4 miles to an early polling station. So it's going to be a hard year for voting, a difficult year for voting. But it's going to be far more important and satisfying because you can tell your kids, this is what you did, because, the civil rights movement didn't end when we got the day off for Martin Luther King's birthday. It's still here, and you got to fight it every year, again and again and again. I'm sorry, it's not over with. The fight for the vote is now, and this year is going to be a lot harder than it's been in half a century.
Okay. Wow.
Well,
so what's your thinking about what would be your advice for staying focused to what we have to do?
Greg, this entire week, every presenter, everybody that had something to say, even though the prognosis wasn't too much hope, minus people getting involved. The saving grace for this entire process is the fact that we can beat this when we all come out to vote, and that's what I have taken from everybody. Yeah, it is difficult, but doggone it, if we come out in numbers, where we can actually make a difference, it would be extremely difficult for somebody to steal the election if it's a whole lot of folk voting, So what I'm thinking is, dog it, we got to come out and we got to vote, young and old. We can't buy the hype that a Kanye West or whomever is speaking for young folk, telling them not to vote. We can't buy that. We can't buy the BS that what does it matter? They're gonna steal it anyway. Hell no, it does matter. If you don't vote, they will steal it. If you don't get in line, and they will steal it. But if you're in line to do it, they can't do it. So that's what I think.
Exactly. Yeah, I know it's easy for Kanye West to tell you, I'll skip it, because you know what? He lives up here in Calabasas. He's fine. Okay. But the rest of us ain't too fine. Okay. Our health insurance is on the line. Our rights, our bodies are on the line. By election day, we'll have probably 250,000 dead. And you know what? In California, 70% of the dead are Hispanic. I wonder what the numbers are in Florida. Who cleans out the hospital pans in Florida? Who is running the kitchen in those hospitals in Florida? Who are the people washing down older people in nursing homes who can't wash themselves? You know what? It's not Kanye West, and it's not a lot of his rich white buddies. You know who's doing this. You know who's at risk.
Yeah.
And so, don't expect the guys not at risk to worry about it. They're going to get their tax breaks. They're going to have their nice little Hollywood setup and their helicopters. They don't have to worry. You have to worry. So you're right. You don't take advice from people who don't have nothing on the line. Most of the people watching now have everything on the line.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
No, I agree. On one side, they would say that if it were comfortable, then people would not participate. And now we've got this counter narrative going that, well, if it's too scared, people won't go. Then what in the hell will get people out there? It's what I'm asking.
If you don't think that this is an important election, I don't know. Then you need therapy. Then you need some psychiatry. And it's not even. I'm going to tell you something. I'm not even saying I'm for or against Donald Trump. That's not the issue. The issue is not, it's about whether the voters pick the president, which didn't happen in 16. And now they're setting it up to take it away. And I'm very concerned. You know, we haven't had the voter drives, the registration drives. We haven't had a lot of the things that usually make it, that usually help out. That's why I'm also asking people to check their registration. My biggest fear is not lack of registration right now. It's that people will lose their registrations and not realize it. We also need help. I mean, one of the big things do have today 750,000 Floridians. A lot of them African American and minorities lost their right to register again. One of the questions, because of this nonsense where they have to pay their old fines, it's not even a matter of not having the money. Because there's some people like Kobe Bryant who says, I'll write a check. You can't find out what you owe. You don't. Who do you pay it to? How do you get the clearance? What type of receipt do you need? And then, of course, they're scaring people. Like 200,000 people did register to vote who had a felony record and served their time and served all their supervision. I don't even know under the law what's going to happen to those voters. Do you know? Do you have the information on that, Brother Perry?
Well, some supervisors have gone on record for saying that if they fill out, if any of the returning citizens fill out an voter registration card, and on the voter registration card, you acknowledge that to the best of my knowledge, I am able to vote. Then if something does come up, they have gone on record to say that they will not prosecute. But again, the devil is in the details, and it's easy to say that when there is no pressure at the moment. But that is the one hard issue in this, is determining what is the amount owed, and no one seems to know that. And so it's been more of a deterrent, I think, to not get especially minorities to vote, for the fear that they don't want to go back. Because again, we do have the young mother in Texas who is now serving a 5-year sentence because she didn't vote.
Right. So she actually, in this case, it was a woman who walked in who said, look, I had a felony record, but I served my time. She didn't, but what she didn't know is that because she was still under supervision under Texas law, that meant that you were still, that you still couldn't vote. And so she didn't know that there was no voter intent to commit a crime. Now you have to understand, what made that case unusual is that usually, like you say, you have to show intent to break the law. And this woman asked the person at the desk, can I vote? And they said, yeah, you can. So you have a government official saying you are a legal voter, and then they still prosecuted her and sent her back to prison. Now, what it's doing is it's scaring people. But like you say, in certain counties. Now, what about Broward? Do you know what the story is in Broward from your supervisor?
Perry, that's your friend.
He is on record for saying that he will not. One thing I will say is that with our current election supervisor, I think his motivation is really just to get this election over with. In fact, he is on record for saying that's really all he wants to do is to make sure that this election does not have any scandal and that it goes smoothly. And so even without a scandal, and even though it goes smoothly, votes can still be lost and votes can still be taken away. So that is a very vague statement. But I told him I want to make sure that I hold him accountable to that. So let's make sure that it is scandal free, and let's make sure that it is fair.
And we are going to have a ton of mail-in ballots, and it'll be up to that supervisor for the most part, with those, and courts, of course, but whether those ballots get counted. And, it depends how, the important thing is to make sure that the voter's intent rules. But we've had too many, and I got to tell you, we've had Democrats who've attacked mail-in ballots in New York. You ready for this? Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio, 2 Democrats, told people in the congressional primary, vote by mail. It's safe, it's effective, no problem. And then those same politicians challenged 24,000 mail-in votes because they had Scotch tape on the envelope, or they didn't have a postmark, or they literally. So the people that told you it's safe to mail in your ballot then challenged your ballot. It was a nice trick. And they were Democrats. So remember, don't count on the Democratic Party to protect you. What you count on is yourself and your community and the people around you. And that's the thing, is one of the problems of COVID is that we have this isolation. Remember, we used to have Souls to the Polls Day, usually Sunday before the Tuesday official election day, where people go in from church groups. And now it's so hard to do because of the social distancing. So we're going to have to use things like this meeting, Zoom, Facebook, the rest. This is excellent. A 2-minute warning. This is our church right now. This is our Souls to the Polls event. So right now, you're going to go check your registration. Right now, if you need it, you're going to ask for that mail-in ballot. Right now, you're going to volunteer to be a poll watcher. Right now, you're going to help someone else vote. You've got to, if there's an older person, you're going to make sure that they've got their ballot and that they filled it out correctly. And maybe you can walk it into the county's, the election supervisor's office. Don't just vote for yourself. I want everyone to commit. You know, Reverend Jackson used to say, arrive with 5.
Right.
I'm saying, help 5 right now. To stay alive, you can't go in. So 5 who can't go in to vote, you're going to help 5 people vote. Make sure that they got their ballot. Check their registrations for them at vote.org. That's number 1. Check the registrations. Number 2, help them make sure they got their ballot. And if they can't get the ballot, you go in and get it for them. Or take it in. Make sure it's filled out properly. If some people have some difficulty filling out their ballot, you're going to have to help out. So make sure. So again, we're going to arrive with 5, but this time we can't arrive physically with 5. You're going to have to arrive with 5 ballots. You're going to have to take that on. So we're going to have, this is the Souls to the Polls event right now.
Right. Wow. Well,
everyone has an assignment.
What a way to end the week, huh?
But it's I mean, yeah, what a way to end the week. You know, I was thinking, Greg, while you were talking, you know, this is a moment. This is a watershed moment. And you know, that old saying, you know, you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You know, people, when you look at somebody who don't have any boots, you know, to put on their feet, or don't even have any feet, I would hope that the empathy as a human being we feel for that person. You know, I don't want to continue to be Black, oppressed, and have my vote stolen, and I know they're doing it. You know, I don't want to be in that boat. You know, and for those of us who don't want to be in that boat, then God damn it, we got to do something to get out of that boat. You know, we have to stand up for ourselves, and we got to do it now. You know, we can't. And Greg, I love you, Emily and Jennifer and Benny. Yeah, that's cool, but we got to do this. You know, it is our right and our responsibility to get the knee off our neck and get the person off our back. We have to do that. And we can do it through voting. You know, we have to do this. And there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. So you people who are in organizations, you know, the Divine Nine, again, the NAACP, and everybody else, the Urban League, the churches, you know, the Masonic orders, Eastern Stars, everybody who's supposed to care about somebody, we got to get involved and do this. If we don't, you might as well kiss the baby and throw him out with the bathwater. So now.
Yeah, you know, you're right. Because, you know, King, you know, everyone remembers King's statement in Montgomery that the arc of history bends towards justice. But people forget the rest of his phrase, which is it don't bend itself. You bend it. You got to lean on that arc of history to make it bend your way. It doesn't happen. You know what King said that people also forget. He said the enemy of justice is not injustice. The enemy of justice is complacency. It's what we don't bother to do. we have to say, yeah, I know. I just, Greg Palast just said, it's not so easy to vote right now. No, it ain't. So what? You can, you know what? Suck it up, because we're going to have to take charge of ourselves. And I'm telling you, and help others. I was pretty horrified by the fact that I saw at my kids' schools, very few students voted. In Georgia, they made it horrendous for students to try to vote, like in Florida. No, my daughter went to a school called SCAD, which has like 50,000 students in Savannah. Not one on-campus polling station. So she would have to take a taxi, an expensive, like an Uber ride to get to a polling station. So very few students did it. They said, who cares? The answer is, you will care, young person, when you have student debt, which is going to crush you. When you find out that you're 26 years old and say, I'm healthy, I don't need health insurance. And then you find out that you got a bad kidney. I'm sorry. You've got everything on the line, especially if you're young. I'm going to be out of here soon, I suppose. So there's not a lot on the line for me. There's a lot on the line for you if you're young. And I'm really talking to young people, because that's the group we need to vote. And that's the group that's going to have, some of the toughest times voting, because students move around, you change your address, they say, oh, you've left the state, you blah, blah, blah. So you're going to have to check your registration, get that mail-in ballot, find out where you can vote, and help other students figure it out too, young people. And if you're not in school but you're young, you've got a lot on the line, man. So I don't know what to do to tell people to vote, except to say your vote can make a difference. The presidency of the United States was determined by just 537 votes in Florida. 537 votes out of, what was it, 8 million in Florida? Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the time. And 500 votes. That's it. Like less than one vote for every 50 precincts. So that's how close. And by the way, that was not the closest election in American history. You know that? We had one election determined by 50 votes. 50 ballots determined an election for the president of the United States. I can't tell you, your vote counts. And you know what? If it goes wrong because you decide you didn't want to vote, I just talked to a kid in Wisconsin who didn't bother to vote 4 years ago. He didn't bother to vote. Now he's voting. He suddenly, because he thought, Wisconsin, yeah, Democrats win that. That's a big deal. And Trump won it by this much, fraction of 1%. Your vote counts. Your vote means something, and make it count. Don't say, it's election day. Oh, wait, my mail-in ballot didn't come. You just figured that out on election day? Fool. Wake up. Make sure, if you don't have your ballot by October 1st and you've asked for mail-in ballot, you better go get it. You better find out what happened. Call your county election supervisor, or go into the county election supervisor's office and straighten it out. Maybe you're not registered anymore. Maybe they sent it to the wrong address, or maybe who knows what. You got to go work on saving your ballot, because if it goes wrong because you didn't vote and it gets so close that there's violence all over Florida, and I'm very worried about Florida and violence. I really am. Mm-hmm. You got to take, if it's decisive one way or the other, you got to make it a victory margin so big that it can't be stolen. Mm-hmm. If you make it close, it will be stolen.
Right. Yeah. And as Bobby and I were talking earlier, or should I say yesterday, we were saying, if what you are doing in this election is the same thing that you were doing in 2016, then it is insane to think that we are going to have a different outcome. And I mean that even if you were registering 100 people in 2016, if you registered 100 in 2016 and you're still registering 100, we haven't moved the needle. So we have all got to find it within ourselves to do more, because the issue requires us to do more. And we're dealing with an administration that has no limits on how low it will go
Mhm.
and they have more incentive to stay in power.
Yeah,
So we
because if
got
they don't stay in power, they're going to go to jail.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
Trump's
yeah.
got to pardon
So
himself, remember.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
So we've got to match that intensity, and not just on social media. And so just because I hollered louder in 2020 is not going to change it. I've got to get out there, and we've all got to dig deep, and we've all got to ask some personal questions. I had a personal friend to tell me that he didn't vote in 2016. It shocked me. And so we have got to start asking, some close friends and really having that close conversation because it is that important.
Yes, I'm very, very worried that, for example, I heard James Carville say on MSNBC, Biden can stay in his basement. It's over. He's got it. Really? And this is not whether you're for or against Biden. I can tell you one thing now. Yeah, Hillary had it locked in too. Who's president? Okay.
mhm.
So if you're complacent on this, you're crazy because there's no space for complacency. As King said, that's the enemy of justice, not injustice. It's you if you're complacent. If you think this is not about me, it's too difficult to vote. Oh, gee, I registered at my school, now I'm home, I can't get my ballot. Well, it's too much of a hassle. No, this is your moment. And if you have grandparents in in say a nursing home or a home or something, you're going to have to help out. You're going to have to make sure that they're getting their ballot, that they're voting, and that you're helping them do that. Take responsibility. Think of everyone in your family that needs help voting, or just some direction that someone who hasn't heard this program and doesn't know that they have to check if their registration, check it for them. Type in their name at vote.org, or in Georgia at Save My Vote 2020.org, or go to gregpalace.com. We'll try to connect you through. Just don't assume. So you not only have to vote your vote, you want to help other people vote, because we need everyone, and not, so we don't have any ability to say, well, that's too difficult for that person to vote. No. And make sure, help people. My mother, who's a school teacher, lost her vote because she didn't properly fill in her mail-in ballot. She didn't fill in the bubble correctly. So she lost her. In California, you can check if your mail-in ballot was counted. Her mail-in ballot was thrown out. My sister lost her vote. She's a lawyer. Okay. So don't assume that, well, yeah, it's no big deal. No, pay attention to all the rules. And you should all check each other's, if you have mail-in ballots, check each other's ballots to make sure that they are done correctly. Seriously.
Mhm.
No mistakes. Follow all the rules. And don't say, oh, I got to mail in my ballot. And you mail it on a Friday, and it doesn't get there you have to get into the voting office before 7 p.m. Don't count on that. So now is when you're voting. Now is when you're voting. And then if you can, in person, early voting, last 2 weeks, or in Broward, the last week before the election, if you can safely and physically do that. Do that.
Yeah. Because again, one of the things I fear is that with so many new people voting by mail for the first time, and Greg, you already know how easy it is to get rejected. Now that you have these first time, especially people in states that vote by electronic voting machines, as opposed to paper ballot voters. But when you have voters who are accustomed to voting by these electronic voting machines, and now they get these ballots, the propensity for error rises greatly. I was talking to someone in another state who said they ran across a issue in I think it was North Carolina, where family mailed all their ballots in one envelope.
Yep.
All rejected.
Of course. I know. So it's a whole bunch of gotcha stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a whole bunch of gotcha stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the Trump-Pence site, and they tell you how to properly vote by mail. They're not messing around. Even though, right? Didn't Trump just tell you that mail-in voting is fraudulent? But if you go to the Trump-Pence campaign site, they tell you how to vote in Florida. They're ahead of you. They're telling you not to vote. That's why you should vote. If there couldn't be a better salesman for the vote. People say, well, what should inspire young people? I was on Run Radio Show, said, how do we inspire young people to vote? I said, I don't care if they're inspired. I don't need you to be inspired. I need you to show up and vote. I don't care if you're inspired. How about this for inspiration? TRUMP. Is that enough inspiration for you? If it's not, then I feel for you. Okay, you better have an opinion. And you know what? And if you're in love with Kanye West and you want to vote for the Donald, that's democracy. I'll accept that. But what you're not going to do is sit on your hands and let someone else pick your leaders. Because when someone else picks your leaders, you're a slave. And I'm serious. You have to take charge of your life. Don't enslave yourself. It's a terrible thing to do.
Very good.
Great. Well, everyone, talk about a way to end the week. The shows were supposed to be an hour. We never made an hour.
Okay.
We flew way past.
But this is really important. And also, you're at ground zero. This election is going to be decided in Florida, and you know it. And once again, you're it. I mean, I don't care. I'm in California. No one cares what I do. But Florida, you're it. And there is no reason this should be a walk away in Florida, given the demographics. And you just had this massive movement from Puerto Rico. Even though Donald Trump doesn't realize that Puerto Ricans are Americans, right? He kept talking about the president of Puerto Rico. Those people, that nation. It's like, that nation is your nation, my friend, because they're not stained orange. So you have nearly 500,000 Puerto Ricans who fled because Trump flooded their country. Now I'm talking like him, flooded their island, and have moved into Florida, especially along the Space Coast and up in Orlando. A lot of people in Broward, I assume. Please, if you have friends, relatives who've come from the island, they can register now. As long as they've lived in Florida, I think it's 30 days, right? As long as you've been in Florida 30 days, you're an American citizen, you come from Puerto Rico, you can vote in Florida. Please register. And, I wish I could say clearly in Spanish. My Spanish is pretty atroz. But please, if you know people who've just fled Puerto Rico because of the conditions, tell them, look, you can strike back at that guy who's throwing paper towels at you.
Yes.
You can throw something back at him. It's your ballot.
Good one.
Yeah. Well,
I think I better get started.
you hate for good things to end.
Was that an hour interview? Where'd you go off to? Did you go to the bar and get wasted? No, the bars are all closed in California. You're not allowed to. So I can't accuse you of sneaking off to the bar because it doesn't exist.
Right.
I'll see you guys, and thank you so much, Brother Perry, Brother Bobby, and all the people online. Thank you. Stay safe. We need you all, and stay alert and vote.
Yeah, and the next time you come to Florida, hopefully it's not to investigate an election. Maybe we can just kind of hang out.
That's a good idea. Let's hang.
Yes,
even if I'm investigating, I'll take some time to hang out. Right. Take it easy.
And Greg, our pages are open to your opinion too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
that's I really thank you. In fact, I hope you mean it because I'll take you up on it.
All right, I mean it.
Today, my whole team was talking about shifting our focus to Florida. Just so you know.
Okay.
So we are
Okay.
very interested in making sure that I'll definitely give you some good material. I hope you'll find it good. Great.
And I'm sure Dr. Chavis wants to talk with you also.
Oh, great. Excellent. Okay. So let's make sure that we stay in contact.
Mm-hmm.
Salam alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Salaikum salam.
Hey, Perry.
Hey, man, this has been a great week, Bobby.
Certainly have.
Ari, come on. We're not gonna close the show out without
Without you,
Ari join us.
yeah.
Uh,
There she is.
yes, everyone. This is the person who has made this possible.
Yeah.
She has worked like a team of mules. I mean, putting up with me alone. I'm not going to even talk about Bobby.
Mm.
Just me.
Okay.
But I do want to publicly say thank you, Ari. This has been great. All the feedback I've heard has been about how wonderful this has gone. And that is really you, and to your husband, Broderick. We're not going to forget Broderick, who helped to make this possible. And so thank you for helping two old guys get on the internet.
No, thank you, Perry. This has been a brilliant idea. It's just been so amazing to see it unfold, and I'm just excited about the collective effort moving forward. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of the team.
Yeah, and we are moving forward. There will be other productions on hot topics and needed topics and conversations with people who are in the know and those who want to know. So we are indeed thankful for all of you who watched, and to the participants, Jennifer, Benny, Emily, and Greg. This was a platform that was laid with a foundation because you guys started not a sleight of hand to be a part of it. And for that, we say thank you. And Dr. Chavis, you came in and put the icing on the cake. We couldn't have done this without your blessings. And we say thank you and the NNPA. I'm reminded of a quote from Edmund Burke that says, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." And I would just add women to that. If we don't step forward with our vote, we will allow an election to be stolen or given away. And the West Side Gazette, as a member of the NNPA, under the broad umbrella of the Black Press of America, we can't let that go down like that. So again, I want to say thank you, Perry. I want to acknowledge that publicly, that it was because of your site to want to do a 2-minute warning that this happened. And so for that, my brother, I say thank you. And man, there's a whole lot more that we can do because we believe in serving. So I just say, let's pray and ask God to leave us, and we can lead us, and we continue to be the servants that we're supposed to be. So I want to say thank you to everybody.
Yeah. And before we go,
Snyder, I see you too, Quincy Snyder.
and before I go, I wear so many hats. People know me either as this IT guy or writer or whatever else. I am the son and grandson of Baptist preachers. I am a preacher myself. Not something I hide, but I do so many other things. But this has really been a ministry for me, a passion, and it took other people to see that. And Bobby, as you were saying about coming together, I guess I want to leave with this. It's a Psalm 133, and it's really one of my favorite that says, "Behold how good and how blessed and how pleasant it is for brothers and sisters to dwell together in unity. It is like the precious oil upon the head, rolling down upon the beard of Aaron, running down on the edge of his garments. It is like the dew of Hermon, descending upon the mountain of Zion. For there the Lord commanded the blessing, life forevermore. And you can't have life without justice.
Yes.
Can't have life without a struggle to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. That is life forevermore. And that is what we choose to do. And so let's come together, because in unity there is strength. And we can all come together at family reunions, but this is a time that we all need each other. In fact, planet Earth needs us to be on one accord. And so I leave you with that. Thank you. With the blessings of our Lord, let's move forward. Let's move forward in encouragement and victory, and we will win this. Thank you.
Preacher man.
Where's Benny? We need Benny with the organ.
Yeah, we need Benny with the organ. Yeah.
Okay. Good night, everybody, and we will see you again. We will see you in the streets, and we're gonna see you at the polls.
Yes,
Right.
sir. And back here. Okay.
All right.
Yo.